Okay, so we're recording now. Um, so welcome, Sofia, to the Snail Show.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you for having me.
what part of the states are you in? Did you say
I'm in Houston,
you're in
in Texas.
Texas?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, tell me about yourself.
Well, I was super nervous to do this interview because I've never been interviewed before, so I guess I might trip over my words a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, I live in Houston. I'm an artist. I've been an artist for several years now. Since high school, I guess I started making art, and I'm really interested in visionary art.
Mm-hmm.
That's uh that's my that's my favorite type of art to look at, and it's kind of what I aim to achieve in my paintings. But I'm also an energetic healer. So
What modality?
sorry.
Do you have like a specific modality or?
Yeah, I perform etheric surgery, and I also do something that I call electromagnetic field therapy.
Okay.
So yeah, I've been doing that for a couple of years now, but I just recently, I think maybe a year ago, made a page for it and
Okay.
started like inviting people
Yeah,
to.
I've been in Reiki for the last couple years, which I think probably has similarities because in Reiki you're essentially working with the light body or the energy body, right? And
Hmm.
and that etheric body as you're talking about, I think it's the same thing. It can have holes and it can be distorted depending on like what kind of things you're going through. So we
Totally,
do the
yeah.
same thing in Reiki, kind of like repairing.
Yeah, etheric surgery is pretty much the same thing, but I'm not familiar with Reiki, so I don't I'm not I know that it uses symbols, right?
Yeah, that's
Energetic
part of
symbols.
it. Yeah, there are three main symbols that you don't have to apply those, but some people like using them. I forget the names of them,
Mhm.
but there are three main ones that one of them looks kind of like a vortex, and you can apply that if you want to like energize a certain spot. And there's also a really long one that you can use as kind of like a bridge if you're trying to link two people together or link two thought forms together mentally. You can apply that into it, and it makes kind of like a conduit for what you're trying to do.
Super.
But Reiki for me has always been very open and open to interpretation, and the people that you're working with, they have to be able to kind of get in with the frequency that you're on. Otherwise, like belief structures kind of come in, and it
Yeah.
blockages happen and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, etheric surgery, from what I can tell, from the little that I know about Reiki, is similar. Of course, you're dealing with the etheric body and you're working to heal it and things like that. But it's really fun. I really enjoy it. It's something that I didn't really necessarily see myself getting into,
Uh huh.
but I didn't know that it was something.
How did you
But
come?
it's
How did you come into awareness of this like field? Uh oh, my internet connection is not great. You there, Sophia? Could you hand me that MacBook Airbox? I want to make sure my computer's not overheating.
This one?
Yeah. Whoops.
Lost it?
lost her. I'm gonna see if I can. She should be able to come back to the same one using the same link. I know people have done that before. Hey, you're back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Bad internet connection.
Oh, good.
On one end, it's okay. Oh, I was asking you how did you come to etheric? What did you call it? Surgery.
Surgery.
Yeah, how did you come into that?
Well, I think you were saying like how did I become aware of that field?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it took place over a long period of time. You know, it was like a slow introduction, and then eventually one day I was standing in my room, and I think I was feeling pretty down about some stuff, and I heard like a whisper kind of describe how to like dust myself off,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, without actually making physical contact with my body.
Okay.
So it was kind of one of those things where I like learned how to do it from my guides or my angels. I'm not really sure.
So it wasn't like an actual person. It was more of a spiritual like download kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a voice that kind of like explained it to me, and then it kind of went from there, and I learned more and more over the years and stuff. You know how you have those moments where you just kind of like hit like this autopilot almost,
Mm-hmm.
and like you go through the motions of something where you weren't sure that you could do that before, but then suddenly it's like you just know what to do and how to do it in that moment. And like it slowly took place over time, but it started kind of like that. It was kind of like I just had a intuitive kind of feeling for it.
That's really cool. So it's kind of, is this a you thing, like where you're the etheric surgery person, or does it exist otherwhere or other places as you know about?
Well, it goes by psychic surgery. It goes by etheric surgery. Some people call it etheric healing. I mean, it's basically a very general, basic term for what people nowadays kind of call psychic surgery.
Uh-huh.
But it's not really like, I feel like psychic surgery sounds a little bit more like, I don't know. It can sound a little bit more like worrisome, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the framework of concepts that you apply into whatever it is that you're doing is very important, because most people have lots of like loaded words in their head. Like for instance, the word truth, right? If you hear that word, then inside of your head, all of a sudden you have like this massive sort of maybe triggering or reaction based on so much stuff that you've attached to that word. So I think kind of to be able to frame your practice in words that are not triggering for everybody makes it more inviting for people to at least take a look into.
Yeah, bro, I just got to my phone.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's very it's very diverse. Like it doesn't just deal with one specific set of issues that a person might be going through, but it's interesting. I mean, I really enjoy it, and I look forward to doing it more in the future. I offer it for free to people, or by donation. They can donate if they want, but.
And do you do this?
Free.
Do you do this in person, or like through a video conference, or just etherically? How does it work?
Any of those things can work. I can be on the phone with someone, or just work remotely, or work in person, or be on FaceTime or, you know, whatever works for them, or um, whatever
Okay.
is possible at the time. But it's, yeah, I don't know. It's
Do you have support? Do you have support in your work where sort of communities know about it and it's not just kind of like I'm doing this thing all by myself type of a feeling? I think I lost her again. You're back.
sorry.
I lost you for a minute. You froze.
Oh, I don't know if it's my Wi-Fi or what, but
I was just asking
yeah.
you. I was just asking you as far as like this work that you're doing. Do you feel that you have a decent amount of community support and sort of networking with it, or is it kind of like it's you and your thing, and you know you have like I know how it is with me in doing sort of spiritual work. It's always there's always some amount of judgment by family, and you know if it doesn't fit into the societal framework. How are you with that? Do you have like support?
I mean, I do. I do have a lot of support. I have support from my friends and family, and you know, some other like healers and artists in the community and stuff like that. And as far as like my healing work goes, I mean, it's one of those things where it's hard, I guess, like you said, to find outlets, like to find places that you can work and things like that. But so it kind of does become like an independent kind of thing.
And
But I have plenty of support, I think.
do you have like a regular job as well, like a 9 to 5, or a side work or something?
I currently don't. I mainly just make art, and you know, I try to kind of like work on my projects as much as I can. I've got a lot of different stuff that I work on, you know, like at all times. I'm always working on some project or painting or drawing or
Can
anything like that. But yeah, I mean, not currently. It's just one of those things, you know, I've had a really hard last few years.
mhm.
So I ended up having to go on disability. And that's been such a mind trip, you know.
You had to go to what again? Sorry.
Disability,
Facility?
disability,
Disability. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
And
So
was that like you don't have to share more than you feel comfortable with, but was that something that came about connected in with the work that you're trying to do?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it definitely you know, it threw me for a loop because it's one of those things where I went through like a mind trip of like, oh my gosh, you know, does this make me less valuable as a person? Am I like less worthy as a person because of this? You know, having to like accept this assistance and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
for a short time, and it's worked out really well because it's actually given me a chance to like work on my art, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and kind of like heal from a lot of stuff that I've been through. So, I mean, I don't really have any problem with it per se, but it's been a journey for sure. You know, I mean, the only reason that I had to go on it at all was because of some spiritual attacks I was dealing with.
Hmm.
So it led to, you know, a long road of doctor's visits and stuff like that, and people trying to diagnose me to figure out what was happening. And, you know, it just became like this thing where it was like Western psychology was kind of like, well, this is typical of schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, you know, you
Yeah.
name it kind of
Hmm.
thing. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on, you know, but they were like, the doctors that I saw were just like not really interested in my perspective, you know. So
Yeah, well, I mean, Western medicine is sort of in bed with scientism, right? And the scientist community does not acknowledge like the spiritual side of humanity, which to me is the only thing really important that's going on. But the sort of upside downness of our society has led everyone to put their eggs in the sort of materialism basket, and it pretends that like spiritual attacks and energetic attacks, all this stuff, the medical community acts like it doesn't exist. So if you're getting something like that and you go talk to the doctor, he's going to label you bipolar, schizophrenic, any host of things that aren't really accurate.
Right. Absolutely, I agree. Like, you know, I've kind of just come to realize that it's like until science and spirituality meet, there's going to be a slew of misunderstandings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's just where we're at right now. So I deal with it to the best of my ability.
Yep. Do you have? Can you talk about your like family life at all, or do you have siblings? How's that been?
I have a brother.
Just two of you?
Yeah, I have an older brother.
Oh, nice.
He lives in Austin.
In where?
In Austin,
Austin. Okay.
Texas. Yeah.
I have 8 siblings. There's a ton of us.
Wow.
We're all over the place in California, and one of us is in Norway.
Oh, cool.
Yep. Do you want to show us some of your art?
Yeah, sure. I was wondering if you maybe wanted to talk a little bit about interdimensional kind of stuff. Not really sure if.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much all I talk about anyway. But I talk about it in sort of words that it doesn't scare off the average human. But
yeah.
It's interwoven into all of my conversation anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess if you can see, this is one painting that I worked on last year.
Mm-hmm.
That most of my work is incomplete. So
right. Well, that's what all artists say, right? It's never finished.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it takes time, I guess, but
is that a being? Is that like what is that to you? What is that painting to you? We lost her again.
Some Wi-Fi boost over there.
Yes.
moving into the light.
Okay, you're back. Can you? Sorry, you got cut off. Can you like re-say whatever you said? Okay, you're back. We're having interference. The interdimensionals are trying to interfere.
Oh man.
Can you start over with your description of the painting?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I get kind of nervous talking about my work, so I'm sorry if I.
No, it's totally fine.
A little bit on you know, out of practice or whatever, but
it's your first.
Yeah,
it's your first interview. It's completely acceptable. Nice.
This is basically an infinity symbol going vertically,
like
and
the eight.
it is also a mother.
Mm-hmm.
This is her two arms, and this is her head, and she's holding these two beings who cross over the line of time and space after they pass away, and they are reunited with the light. So that's kind of what this one was about, and I really enjoyed just like visually, you know, it's a cool painting for me. I enjoyed making it and stuff, but yeah, not to get heavy or anything, but
how did you come to using red? How'd you pick red?
I think, you know, maybe just because it's a very vibrant like color that can be considered like symbolic of love, you know.
It's also blood.
Um,
I'm not saying blood in a negative context, but like life blood is like our base essence that like it's our flow, right? It's the rivers inside of our own body.
totally.
Even though they say it's blue inside, but I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because, like, whenever you said that, I felt like I wanted to mention, like you said, like, words that trigger certain thoughts and emotions in people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, art is all about staying, like, open to interpretation, and it's an interesting concept for sure. Interpreting meaning.
Bring all of them. Show me all your paintings. Not all of them, but I want to
Like,
see.
This is another one. I tried to pick some that were like finished or like close to finished because I don't really want to like bore you with like unfinished paintings. But this is another one
Oh wow.
that I made in 2015 and I finished in 2019. And it took a super long time. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if the light's like messing with it.
I can see pretty good. It looks like the sky is very detailed.
Yeah, it's a very detailed painting. It took me a long time to make, but this one's about interdimensional friends, allies of the planet Earth landing and helping us create a more sustainable future.
Mm-hmm. Interdimensional friends? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. And is the top thing symbolizing the sun, or is that something different? That shape up there?
This is basically like just it's a symbol with a heart in it. It's supposed to be the symbol of these beings.
Mm. So you feel like you're a channeler of sorts, like you're channeling a bit of interdimensional energies through the paintings?
For sure. I mean, like, I was really, really interested in creating art, and then I got into visionary art, and I thought it was really cool and stuff, and then it was like I started painting paintings that I kind of wanted to portray as like communicating like my experiences with spirit and stuff, and it just took me on a long journey. I think like every painting's different, and you get messages and downloads and things like that, and it's like, whoa, like you like before I thought it would be kind of like you have an experience and then you reflect it the best way you can in a painting,
Mm-hmm.
But it became like making the painting was a whole experience and was an entire journey in itself.
Right. Yeah, I don't do a lot of painting. I actually did one fairly recently, but the way I was brought up with creating art was like the copycat thing, where it's like look at a bird and then try and like make the exact thing on the paper, and then if all of your angles are correct and your proportions are correct and the colors are correct, then you did something really good, like that was the thing I tried to hold myself to, and I eventually realized that was super one-dimensional way of trying to create. And I started when I would get ready to paint or draw or something, I would have a bit of framework, like a bit of initial idea, and maybe sketch that on lightly or something, and then just let the flow happen to where I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't even necessarily know what it was as far as like conceptually, but like you were saying, it becomes its own experience, and you're pulling from different energies, you're pulling from different memories, and all of the thoughts and emotions that go along with that. And then when you're finally done, if you ever reach there, then you've like portaled yourself out into it's a different dimension. And then people looking at it can see that.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I agree completely.
It's very therapeutic too. If you're not too harsh of a self-critic, which most of us are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely very hard on myself, but I I've been working on it.
Yeah.
I've been working on it. So.
Do you put them? Do you sell them at all, or do you have them available for copies if people want to get prints or something?
I've never made prints. I want to do that someday, but I usually just sell the originals, and usually it's a friend or family member that buys it. I've never like set up at a show or a festival or anything like that. But
are you interested in getting into that?
Someday I definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Someday, I mean, whenever I feel like I can kind of like, calm my nerves to the point where I can handle it, then I would love to do something like that eventually.
Do you have a website or no? I think you said you finally made one, right?
I made a site, but it's not published yet. I guess collecting like photos of my work and stuff has been like kind of a challenge. Just technology stuff. Like It's on my hard drive, and I have to like go through all these different files to find these photos. But yeah, no, I mean, I have my Facebook page, and people can go there and check it out. And I post to it every once in a while, and I kind of stopped posting to it after some time because it just kind of wasn't getting many, like, it wasn't really engaging people. So I didn't really, I didn't really use it. But yeah.
Facebook is kind of it's always been difficult for me because I used to create like lyrics. I used to create a lot back before I had any attention on myself, and I would try to like get out there with the stuff I created, and I know for a fact it's difficult. Facebook would rather have selfies and meme reproduction factory. It's not so much interested in seeing unique original art, and that's built into the algorithms. I already know that. So like if you're a genuine artist and you're trying to create, you're trying to reach people, putting something out on Facebook is not necessarily going to reciprocate what you're trying to do. It can, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, that's been one of my struggles the whole time, is to be able to get out into the arena where whatever it is that I'm doing is simply appreciated. It doesn't have to be like, or simply seen at least, And I feel like that is happening. It's happening more so where sort of the artistic self is not being suppressed so much in general, but you never know. Like if you create something and put it out, you never know if one person is gonna see it or 10 people. It's difficult to like try and track it. Do you have any more? Do you have any more you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, I've got some small ones I was working on, but I guess I can't really decide. But here's one that I've been working on for some time.
Wow, is it a river?
Yeah.
Yeah. And are those two like people up on the top left?
Yeah.
Looks like you got a dragon or something in there too. Some dragon energy on the right.
Yeah, this is also like a chief. I don't know if you can see him. There's a chief with his hands together in prayer, and he is blessing someone who's going up the river to visit Buddha.
Also, if anybody who's
this one took me a long time.
It's more what?
It took me a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if anyone who watches the video is interested, you might get some people who would say like, "Hey, I want that one," or "I want that one," or "I'd like a copy or a print of that," just to let you know, like, if you would like to open it up to the people watching, to receive in some way or donation or something, that's also an option, because this is also helping you get a little bit more exposure to your work and outreach into the community a little bit. I've found, like, as far as getting into the community, a lot of it is just our own internal things that, like, self-judgment and sort of fear things. There are lots of blocks that just stop us from simply reaching out into the community, and really everybody just wants to be able to interact with each other, but we're all having these blocks inside, right?
Right.
So just if you can be a little brave with your work and release a little bit of the criticism, then, you know, maybe somebody can come in and interact with your specific creations.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone is more than welcome to. Please go check out my Facebook page, check out my Instagram, you know, and people can feel free to message me and be like, hey, you know, I like this piece. How much is it? And I will work something out with them. You know, I try to keep my art affordable too.
Yeah.
So if somebody can only afford so much, then I usually just cut them a deal and give it to them for what they want. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
so,
trade
yeah,
trade as well. We do trade for Reiki a lot. Like, trade Reiki for a massage. Like, I feel like getting back to the sort of barter economy is good to have.
Yeah, I just traded a painting and a medicine bag for a healing session a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. I met somebody really cool that way and was able to, like, learn a lot, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I know that this is a little bit stressful for you, just being that it's like your first kind of interview.
No worries.
So,
I was hoping we would be able to talk more about, like, about some of the topics that you had mentioned.
we can keep going. I'm not cutting you off. I'm just
Yeah.
finding ways to proceed. If you have other topics, then we can certainly talk more.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm trying to think of something that is most likely both relevant and important that people might want to hear about. Maybe like the interpretation of meaning. I mean, what do you think?
Interpretation of meaning.
Yeah.
I have my own sort of pet peeve with words in general, with our language that we use, the English language. It's inadequate, and also, like, you know, I'll be sitting talking, right, and I'll be using a word, and then I'll think, oh, you know, you just said language is inadequate, right? And then you're, like, using the word inadequate to say something about, like, there's a very weird reflexive oddity to using language to try to express something that, like, we have inside.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of misinterpretation that happens just because the words are clunky, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Sure.
and like what you're talking about with accessing the other dimensions, that's actively bringing in something that's beyond language. It's beyond words. And for instance, if you make a painting, you're communicating something to whoever looks at it, and that communication can happen without them ever saying anything about it, and without you trying to explain, like, why I made that shape, why is that color. You can do that, but the communication happens just by looking at it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the meaning is, you know, assigned by the individual, I guess, the perceiver.
Right, and some things can't be put into words. Like if you're watching a sunset or something, you know, and maybe some certain smells come in that remind you of a childhood situation, and you have some nostalgia. You know, like the our lived experience is so rich always in how much is flowing through it, but we get caught up in the words a lot and the societal sort of pressing, like a lot of people, we were just having this conversation, a lot of people, when they finally find some free time, they can't enjoy themselves because they feel like they're not accomplishing something, right? They're not doing some work, right? And these are words, these are loaded words that come and insert into your mind when you have the actual free space you've been wanting, and then they actively block you from enjoying that free space when you have it.
Yeah.
So it's a big journey, like it's a big thing to try to manage your life enough, and we have enough blocks, we have enough societal judgments on on you, on everybody, on what you're doing. Most of that stuff is sent through words and their clunkiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't get a lot of judgments that come as like pure waves of emotion. You can get those, but a lot of it I feel is just lost in translation, and you end up doing it to yourself. Like we end up imprisoning ourselves, even if we have the free time to go. Like you can go out and talk to people versus staying inside, but a lot of us just stay inside and watch the TV or stay with all the heavy feelings that we've accumulated over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because those feelings that accumulate and stuff like that. It does create like as you know, like layers in your aura, and it creates like energetic blockages. And removing those blocks, oftentimes you end up going through an entire experience just to remove the block. Like you're shown a scene or you're shown a symbol, or and removing those is difficult, especially when there's like other interpretations going on, that are keeping people from understanding what's really like happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, one of the things that I thought was interesting was this idea that have you kind of noticed with like there's a lot of clickbait like on Facebook and stuff, and it might be like a spiritual retreat or like an online kind of guru kind of type or whatever, and then I'll see like post like not memes but like quotes and stuff like that about like spirituality and like lessons, short compact little tidbits of information about a huge spiritual lesson.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'll see is that it's kind of like, you are reflecting your reality onto this reality that we see, and that dictates your experiences, and that dictates what things mean and things like that. And I don't know. I felt like I was very confused by that. Like whenever I would read it, I was like, I don't really know like how does that work? Like how do people? I mean, there's no way that my interpretation takes precedence over all this that I'm experiencing. And I think what it really led me to understand was that the subconscious is not only me as my subconscious isn't only me, it's everyone. And that is when they say that the subconscious is like playing itself out, on a world stage, like it's everyone, and it's hard to really kind of like understand the meaning behind things whenever we're kind of taught that it's kind of our fault, like what happens to us, or how people interpret us, or thoughts and emotions that are thrown at us and stuff. it's that lesson of like, it is definitely you causing everything you're experiencing. And it's like, I mean, you know, I just had to kind of read between the lines, I guess, to understand what that meant.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of responsibility, like self-responsibility for one's actions and creations. It's 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 an interesting thing because we live in like a vindictive society, right? We live in a court essentially. It's a very large court, and what happens on the external, for the most part, in headlines, as far as our regular news, it's just like judgments. It's calling out problems, deaths, dictatorships, shitty economic moves and controls by governments, foreign relations. It's all of these sort of judgments on whatever group, whatever person, whatever country, and it never gets resolved that way because you can't call out an entity that's composed of like 500 other entities and try to ask that entity to be responsible. So it ends up that you're just stuck like throwing like poop at a thought form, right? So like people say, oh, Russia is colluding to try and sway the election, right? That's a big thing in the politics now, that Russia colluded with Trump to try to sway the elections, right? Now, you just have that one thought come into your head, and your brain, because your brain knows how to sort of like anthropomorphize everything, right? It applies human attributes to literally everything. So if you say the word Russia, inside of your mind is thinking like Russia is this actual like concrete person type entity, like with its own mind, and you create this narrative that can't even exist in the reality whatsoever because Russia's composed of millions of people, right? That all of which have their own subset of subconscious, and it ends up that you're having this conversation and you're actively applying emotions into it, like, oh, I don't like Russia, I don't like Trump, or I do like Russia, I do like Trump. You're actively engaging emotion wise, and you're actually not talking about anything. That's what it ends up coming to. And that's not the route of self-responsibility. The route of self-responsibility is saying, me as this one body, I'm one body, one mind, one set of emotions. How do I very concretely interact with my immediate environment, right? My immediate family members, my immediate room, and how do I, maybe get into the actual community, whether it be your physical community or Facebook or social media, and have actual impact rather than sit here and spout off about, these placeholders. Like when you talk about a company, say you talk about AT&T and you're bitching and moaning about them, you're complaining about a placeholder, and what you're saying just doesn't have any relevance to anything. Not really. It's more like mental masturbation. So if you actually wanted to talk about AT&T or the problems, you'd bring up specific situations that the company was involved with and then talk about those maybe. But still, even that is like a removal from, I feel like the society has given everybody the opportunity to just like simmer inside of the collective angst in a very general way, to where they're always in complaining mode or sad mode or frustrated mode, but they're not ever actually talking about really specifics. They're talking about placeholders.
Oh God. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, it's the whole corporation, dilemma that we're facing is very it's very complex, but it's also rooted in a spiritual place, which a lot of people do not realize.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very difficult to deal with because it's not, these labels have huge impact on our everyday life. You know what I mean? I mean, they what feeds us, houses us, clothes us, gets us from point A to point B. You see a label wherever you go for whatever you do. You know what I mean? And usually they're pretty old labels, and they're very old money. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, I mean, it's rooted in something greater that I don't need to go. If you don't want me to go into it, I don't have to. But I don't mind discussing it. It's just one of those things where I think it's important that people know, but it's not mainstream, and it's definitely not something that like older people would immediately grasp and be like, okay, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, no, you can get into it. I mean, most of I can play both. My speech is mainstream to the sense that like it's hard to pick apart that I'm saying anything fringy, but it's just like that because I'm 100% totally fine with everything that I say, and like,
totally.
and so if you, yeah, jump in the pool, if you want to dive in there and dissect spiritually the corporation thing, that's totally fine.
Well, I mean, there is, I guess I'll start with like this, but we call corporations entities.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's kind of interesting that an entity is also a spiritual being,
Mm-hmm.
And that we call corporations entities. But I mean, as far as I am, and am aware at this point, based on like my like experience and my knowledge of the subject, I've been dealing with essentially very negative energies for a very long period of time, like about 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
Day in and day out. I'm constantly faced with entities that are coming at me and trying to basically dismantle me, like, and take apart like whatever it is that I'm trying to do, which is, usually just making art and talking about things like this.
Right.
But but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I learned that there are corporations in the higher dimensions
Mm-hmm.
that have basically trickled down and caused this refraction to happen, and we're seeing it in our dimension. We're seeing corporations kind of take over
Mm-hmm.
and kind of get away with taking over in a way that is not healthy for most people. The ingredients they're using, the products that they're giving us, like the processes that they're using to create these products aren't typically like safe or healthy for the environment or safe, for people. And so, I kind of had to go through a dream basically where I was shown a map of these corporations that were overseeing a lot of different parts of the world. And I mean, it made a lot more sense when I saw it. You know what I mean? It like everything kind of came together, and I was like, oh, okay, like that's why I'm seeing my reality be kind of overtaken by these entities, these corporations, these companies that before, for some reason it was kind of a dream for a while, and then I kind of realized that something bigger was going on. But
can you elaborate a little bit on what you feel it means by saying corporations exist in the higher dimensions and they trickle down to this one? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, basically, spirits create alliances, spirits create larger groupings and label those groups, and in some capacity, there have been entities who have created like more negatively based groupings that affect a lot of people, so it's something. The only reason I talk about it, I guess, so like I guess so loosely, I was very much looking forward to maybe mentioning something about it today because I feel that it's really important for people to be more aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I was kind of like interested in discussing the interpretation of meaning because I wanted to know how you felt about it and what you thought. And I mean, basically, you know, I think that some of these entities, pretty much like several people that I know have to deal with negative entities.
They have to deal with them?
Yeah, like day to day, like regular basis, like a lot of people that I know go through that and deal with, you know, negative spirits and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically kind of drawn into helping with this issue because a lot of it I discovered was like undeserved.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to help with this issue and research it and do spiritual work to try and alleviate my friends and family and stuff like that of issues that they were facing dealing with this kind of stuff. And I mean, you know, it just turned into a huge, like, a very, very complex, like, download, you know, over a long period of time of really discovering what's going on with it and how it affects the world, really, and just basic ways that it affects us in everyday life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I wanted to say something about the word corporation. It does mean body and like speaking, like body speaking. So like, and I wanted to reframe a little bit my understanding of it in a not so negative context because I had previously held this idea that like you're speaking you're speaking life into the dead body, right? Like corporation, right? That was the connotation I had toward that word for the longest time, and it kind of got me starting to resent the idea in the first place. And then, but at the same time, like a body does not need to be seen as dead or alive. Like that label system is also in conjunction with the whole religious hierarchical idea that there does exist like life and death. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you can go past that dichotomy, all of matter is alive. Like everything is vibrating. There, even if a spirit leaves a body, the body doesn't die. It just transmutes itself into other elements, right? And the spirit goes somewhere else. So to reframe corporation in a not so negative context, it can just be seen as animating a body of knowledge. Like, for instance, AT&T, like we're talking about. AT&T is a placeholder label for a body of knowledge, which includes beings, it includes processes, it includes technology, and it includes past records of everything that body of knowledge has done. And it does not have to be negatively connotated if you don't wish it to be.
Absolutely not. I agree, and I think that, you know, what we're facing, though, to a greater extent than I was aware of, you know, prior to this dream I had and this message that I got, it was just basically taking that concept of a grouping that is a body that is speaking for as one, you know, and a business that provides a service to people, and essentially like taking it and abusing it. You know what I mean? Like hoarding wealth and like hoarding resources and you know, not being honest about the way that people are getting their resources and stuff like that. Like maybe like a diamond mine or something. You know,
right?
Diamond mine or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people deal with it, and I'm always you know, around to discuss things like that, and to really like give a listening ear to people who are dealing with entities who are aggressive, who will not leave them alone. That's like one of my specialties. So that's one of the things that I deal with most.
It's definitely a needed service, especially at this place in time, because people, unless you've been doing your self work very intensely, then you're going to be confused at this moment in time. Like, it's almost impossible for that not to happen, because there are so many, first off, layers and levels to the universe, just period. Like, if you're still in the first layer, the first, like, oh, I'm a human and I need to get a job and then have kids and then get married and then die. Like, if you're in that, that's like the first, like, given societal mental construct, mental framework for your life. You're going to be confused, because that's it's almost like a big joke. That first level barely has anything to do with any of the continuum of dimensions that we live in simultaneously. So, like,
right, and I think that like what you said about like that idea of work, reproduce, just go through life. It's kind of almost like a deterrent. You know what I mean? For people to not really pay attention to what's going on, but to just have these like super basic goals, but not really look into the details of what they're doing as far as like how they feel about their environment and how they feel about people around them. And I feel like a lot of things are generally kind of geared towards the negative nowadays, but that's not to say that there isn't a lot of positive out there, and that people can definitely kind of, I don't know, people have more access to spiritually based like concepts now more than they have in the past, as far as just kind of a more general higher perspective, you know what I mean, like outside.
yeah, it has
Or anything.
sorry, somebody's coming in. The dog is going insane. Saki, like, goes nuts. She knows everybody here in the house, and still every single time she goes crazy, and it's never anyone other than just like the family, basically. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The whole scene has opened up to where, to me, there isn't any more what do you call it, like, active suppression, as far as like a being saying, I don't want this other being saying such and such thing, so there's built-in suppression. Like, there's algorithmic, computationally driven, built-in suppression that the aware person has to know how to navigate in order to be able to have a voice. And if they do know how to navigate it and they figured it out, then you have a voice. Like, I have a voice, and I'm not suppressed. I'm somewhat suppressed, but I know how to navigate those seas. So, like, you basically just have to figure it out. You have to do like trial and error and see what works, see what doesn't work, see what level of volume you're able to operate at. Like, there's just a lot that goes into it. But it's wide open. To me, it's completely wide open right now.
Cool.
And it's like, how brave is the individual, how brave is the person to actually like peer into the thing with someone else, like on a show like this, or with anybody who you're having a conversation with. Like, it requires a certain amount of guts to even like dive into it.
Yeah, I feel like if some of my friends watch this, they'll be like, this is what she always talks about. But it's one of the things where it's kind of like the dealing with negative entities, dealing with negative energy, stuff like that. It basically consumed my like work life for the last 5 years, and that's what drove me to become a healer so intensely. Is because I had to start dealing with it. I had to start fighting it. I had to start working through it. I had to start, clearing these energies and protecting myself and stuff like that. And it forced me to learn a lot about etheric surgery and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's not. I guess it doesn't have to be an uncomfortable subject, because what I'm trying to say is I'm not pointing fingers at anyone.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I just know that there are influences out there in the spirit world who are very keen on basically, like, hopefully not allowing a conversation like this to happen, or not allowing certain conversations to happen. That's one thing that I noticed whenever I first got into the visionary art scene and stuff. It was one thing to experience certain things and discuss them in a kind of formal manner, but talking about the spirit world and talking about things that were not like physical necessarily was somewhat like quieted in like
Right. Right.
It was harder to do that because I feel like there's a lot of attention on those kinds of like energies and stuff. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, I just go for it and I talk about it because it's important to me, and I know that a lot of people deal with it. I mean, I know people in my life who deal with it, so I don't assume that there aren't other people out there, you know.
It is. It's important. It's important to just show strength. You know, you're showing community strength by being able to talk about something, and the fact that you can come on here and talk about it openly enough, it gives other people like permission. You know, like that happened. She did it. It's fine. You know, it's not a big deal. It's something everybody deals with, so it's good to talk about it. You know, and then you somehow, at some point, internally you lessen, because the spiritual suppression stuff happens from the inside out. Yes, you could say, you know, spirits are coming and nagging at you and they're stopping you from talking and you feel bad. It takes two to tango, and if you are not like being seducted by those energies, then you can speak your mind. Like it's you just can't externalize the blame like how everybody has gotten used to doing and playing the victim. Because if you do that, then you will be suppressed, and it's going to be part outside, and it's going to be part you accepting it.
Right, and there's a reason that kind of happens, you know, and it's not so much that people are maybe per se physically stopped from discussing these things, but it's an energetic kind of vibe that takes over. And, you know, that's whenever you kind of start looking around and you're like, where's that actually coming from? Because the only people who are in this room who are discussing this are all super stoked and like super excited to have this conversation and share these things. So then this like awkward cloud comes over, and it's like, where is that cloud coming from? So that definitely like opened my eyes a lot to other things that were going on that I didn't really understand at the time. But yeah, I mean, for sure, I appreciate, you know, like you having me on here and you know, being open to discussing such things. And
yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I feel like part of what I'm doing is helping to normalize just talking about the life how it is, which is multidimensional. Because like that modality of identification as being a multidimensional person, entity, being has always been vilified, and that's only been the case because the energies that want to suck loosh and energy out of you are able to do that with a free hand if you accept it in that way, right? So part of what I'm doing is just helping to normalize the discussion of stuff like this, and it's normal because it's what exists. What's not normal is you pretending to be in the linear 9 to 5 slot and act as if nothing else exists. That's what's not normal.
Right, I agree. Yeah, and all it really takes is asking questions, you know. But like, I really encourage people to like not be afraid to talk about this kind of stuff, not be worried about, you know, any kind of like stressful stress that could come of it, you know what I mean? But like, it's definitely more common than I ever thought, you know, and it was definitely more of like a force than I really was aware of, you know, and that's kind of like one of those things where I grew up, you know, there were scary movies, there were like, you know, I'm just like scary movies, for example, like horror movies and stuff. And I was like, blah blah blah, yeah. Like I never really like looked at it and thought what exactly is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it
You just have to pull at any one string on that massive ball of yarn, that everyone's been running away from. You just have to pull one string. Yeah, the whole thing will unwind in front of your face. And you need support when you do that. So like that's why I'm saying we have to build the communities. We have to actually talk with each other, because otherwise it's just you in your own mind against your own mind, and you don't ever go anywhere. You just go in circles.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really any way to figure this out without discussing it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And each person brings a different perspective. So if you're able to discuss without fear of some sort of repercussion, and I'm not saying there is no repercussion. There is, as you obviously know. That's what you're helping to teach about, right? Is the repercussions from sort of being authentic and vulnerable. There are repercussions, but if you can get to the spot where two people or three or whatever are openly discussing, then you see different perspectives of the same sort of existence that you're all staring at, and you increase your awareness in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've boiled it down to some very basic, simple truths, and that helps a lot. Like finding ways to interpret things to where like you really get the essence of what something's intention is. If an entity tries to approach you like while you are in a altered state or whatever, basically being able to read their message and read their basic intention. And yeah, I mean, you learn a lot from looking at people's intentions and looking at their focus, and it's definitely a long journey.
It's a lot. There's a lot in there. Can you text me or message me any ways of contact that you'd like to provide to anyone watching this if they want to get a surgery, energy surgery or etheric surgery, or if they just want to talk to you, etc., or if they want to buy your art or connect with you in any way? Just message me through Messenger, email, whatever, website. If you don't have that, then just your Facebook, I guess. But you don't have a YouTube, right?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But yeah, I will definitely send you those links, and I encourage anybody to contact me if they want to discuss any of the things we've talked about in the video, or they want to check out my art, or whatever. Like get a healing session. That's totally cool too. It's free or by donation. So
yeah.
So I'm always up to work with people. But yeah, I will do that for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. You were good. First interview, a little bit of nerves at the beginning, but you completely warmed up in the middle, so it was very good.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.
Have a good one, Gary.
You too. Excuse me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.